Well, greetings to you again from Wolfson College, Cambridge University. I am making this video on Sunday. I just got back from visiting a church in Cambridge. The pastor there, Reverend Paul Butler, is a graduate of Christ for the Nations Institute. In fact, years ago, he went to CFNI with his wife and was a member of my church while at CFNI and finished there. And I encouraged him to go on in his education. He went to a university that I went to, Southern Methodist University, subsequent to which then he came here and went to Cambridge and did a degree in divinity and got ordained with the Anglican Church here, the Church of England. And now he and his wife serve in that capacity. And it was great to be with them. I had a suit on back then, one of the rare times I wear one. Actually, I went down in the foyer here to meet another fella, Carl Lundley, a student with me here at Cambridge, who is a police executive with Metropolitan Police in London, 32,000 member department. And so he was wearing a suit, so I said, time out. I came and ran and put a suit on and went to church. And I don't do it very often, but I mean, I go to church, I don't wear a suit. But anyway, so much for all that. It's great to see graduates at work in the field, and you never know what's going to become of it all. I don't know if Paul and his wife Sue ever envisioned that they would be pastors with the Church of England here at Cambridge, in Cambridge. But, you know, there are individuals that go to the CFNI that many evolve into the ministry, and others take on vocations that are not of religious vocations in nature, but they take faith with them into the marketplace, and I'm really good with that. In any case, we're going to pray together, and what I want to do is get into the book Numbers, so-called. Bamidbar in Hebrew. Midbar is the word for wilderness, and Bamidbar means in the wilderness, and we want to climb into that world. But let's pray together first, and then we'll have at it, okay? Lord, come before you and bless your name, and thank you for those within the sound of my voice, Father, and thank you that we can gather together digitally, soon face to face, we hope, Lord. We pray for your kingdom to come and your will to be done, Lord. Pray, Father, as the culture finds itself unraveled in different ways, unruffled or ruffled in different ways because of COVID-19 and COVID-19 related circumstances, Father. I pray that more see you as the answer and that you use us to let people know that you are the answer. Pray in Jesus' name, amen. Okay. Midbar, wilderness. Remember, when we open up the Old Testament, we're climbing back in time 3,000 plus years ago. And as the story is told, a group of people were led out of Egypt. They made their way to Sinai. There, Moses delivered the Ten Commandments. There, resources were gathered together to manufacture this portable worship facility. There, instructions were given for what it is to live a godly life as these individuals then go walk into the new economy. Well, when you get to the book of Numbers, it's time to go. Not just to dwell there at the base of the mountain, but to get on to Canaan. The journey from where they were at Sinai to Kadesh Barnea is an 11 days journey by foot. And it's not that much. It's just not a lot. The people are organized at the beginning of the book, and I want to look at the outline here. So if you will, please, Numbers, the first 10 chapters, 1:1 through 10:10. That's titled Preparations for Departure. It begins with a numbering in order to assess those who are of military age and capability. They are going to go into Canaan, and there will be wars to fight. And there's this assessing who it is that can go on the journey. There's a second numbering. I'll comment on that later on. But there's this basic organizational, matters attended to. That is, if you're looking at a group that's about 2 million people, and if you're looking at 600 plus thousand fighting men, you can extrapolate from that, and readers are informed there's a sizable group here. Well, then you have to organize. If you've ever gone on a family outing with just 3 kids and 2 parents, it can get rather complex to get it all together. When are we leaving? What are we packing? How are we going? Where are we stopping? All that. Now, this is 2 million. So there's instructions given here. There's the cloud, the fire that leads. Then when it stops, they build their camp around it. And when they build their camp around the tabernacle, the divine guidance stops. They build a tabernacle around that. And then 2 million people are going to set up campment around that. There's an organized way that it's done by tribe, where the locations are, by family. The tabernacle is the central space, but there's instructions about where people present relative to that space. It takes instructions for military men marching, for people camping, and all the rest. So I'm particularly interested in the second subsection, chapter 10, verse 11 through 21:35. And then to a lesser extent from chapter 22:1 through 36:13. I'm interested in looking at the 11th chapter, and I want you to open up your Bible, please. And the book Numbers, as I'd said, in Hebrew it's called Bamidbar, in the wilderness. Now, you're looking at, if you figure we're tapping around the second year when they begin the journey from Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, the southern entrance point, Judah. We're 2 years deep into the journey. From the time they left Egypt, they went to Sinai, they camped there, and then they go up to the southern part of Canaan. Someone said it took the Hebrews 40 years to get from Egypt to Canaan. No, it took them 40 years to get into it. They were right up there on the border on the second year, but then they didn't make it in. They got turned around. We'll look at that a little bit. The book of Numbers, let's say from this chapter, where are we, chapter 11 through the end, just really gives the highlights of the wilderness journey, or better, the lowlights, as I like to put it. It's just, when you look at it, you can see it's a miserable story. You can see something's gone horribly wrong. You get this sense when you read Genesis, you read the first 10 minutes of Genesis, you realize, whoa, things have gone horribly wrong. And then you see it doesn't get a whole lot better. Same sort of thing here. If you look in chapter 11, verse 1, the people were murmuring in the ears of the Lord about hardship. And when the Lord heard, his anger burned. And the fire of the Lord blazed among them, ravaging the outskirts of the camp. People are murmuring because of their hardship. They're very disconcerted. And God is not a very happy camper. If you look at verse 4, the grumblers among them began to have cravings. So the sons of Israel began to wail repeatedly, saying, if we could just eat some meat, we remember the fish that we used to eat in Egypt for free, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now we have no appetite. We never see anything but this manna. They're complaining about their food source. It's an 11 days journey from Sinai to Kadesh Barnea. And there are these miracle food apportionments. And it's a short-term experience to go from point A to B. It's like if you're in the military, out in the field, you'll carry rations with you. It's not mother's home cooking, but it'll get you through. But no one's asking you to eat it for the rest of your life. But here, we're just early in on the journey, and people are like, listen, I don't want this crap. They're just complaining about it. If we could just get some meat. Then they say, we remember the fish that we used to eat in Egypt for free. The cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now we have nothing but this junk. It's so stupid. You would think when you read this, when they were in Egypt, they were living right next to a delicatessen. Oh, yummy, all the good food we can eat. You know, it sounds so good in Egypt. Well, if it was so good in Egypt, why did they want to leave in the first place? It wasn't all that good. But now that they're away from it, it looks real good. I will grant that whatever they ate for free. They were slave stock. You know, at the end of the day, their masters would feed them well. So that way they can be refreshed and go to sleep at night and mate and make new slaves for them. And that way, and they can get up the next morning and work like a dog through the hot sun to the end of the day. Yeah, they fed them well, but that's all they got out of the deal. I don't know if it was this good. But what happens is here they start longing for back there. And it's not the first time we've seen this. When Moses went up, according to the literature, previously in Exodus, he goes up the mountain, he's gone 40 days, and they've made a golden calf, they're wanting to go back. And here, they're not wanting to go back per se, but they're looking back. It was better back then. It's so stupid. But you know, it's not unique to them. And I say that because, you know, you could, let's say you take someone now, let's say you used to get high and sex and all that, you know, you're single and just living it up, baby. And then you get saved and now you're a monk. You know, you're not getting anything. You know, you're just, you're not getting that loving, you're not getting that high, you're not getting that buzz, you know. And what happens is you can look back and go, man, back in the day, you know, because you're in an intermediate point right now. You know, you don't know who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. You don't necessarily know what you're going to do. You're kind of on a journey in a wilderness. You know, it's easy to kind of look back and go, oh, yeah, baby, back in the day, I had it made. Yeah. Well, look, if it was so good back then, who made you get on your knees and say the sinner's prayer and come over to this side of the house? You know, who made that happen? It wasn't all that good back then, but there's a sense in which when you're frustrated, you can make it look better than what it really was or is, and that's what's at play here. And the thing to underscore is that the people are grumbling. And we're going to see that over and over again. There's an attitude. They're complaining. There's a lot of unrest. If you look in chapter 12, I want you to see that it's not just the people generally that are murmuring. If you look in chapter 12, verse 1, then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses on account of the Cushite woman whom he married, because he had married a Cushite woman. Now, that's kind of stupid. What's interesting here is the repetition. It says that it mentions Miriam first. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses on account of the Cushite woman he married, because he married a Cushite woman. It's saying it twice. It's bringing forth the fact that she was an Ethiopian twice. And if you look at Cush in antiquity, it's Ethiopia in modernity. Now, you go, well, wait a minute. You know, earlier we read that Moses married this Midianite woman. Okay, does he have two wives? Is the Midianite the Cushite? The Midianites traveled. They were Bedouin. They did a circuit. But here what's brought forth is the fact that you have the big sister, Miriam, that doesn't like her sister-in-law. And I'll tell you something, just from a police officer perspective. There ain't no feud like a family feud. And I'll tell you something, big sisters can be quasi-mothers. You know, and this woman, Miriam, had been looking out for her baby brother, Moses. She was like his mom in so many ways. And big sisters can be like that. I know that because I'm the only boy in my family. I happen to be the youngest, and so I've dealt with big sisters all my life, and I still do. Well, here, Miriam doesn't like Moses' wife. And what happens is she drags Aaron into it. It's like that in church work. Pastor, I want you to know a bunch of us are mad at you, blah, blah, blah. No, it's really just you and the people you're talking to. The small circle of people that you're drawing in. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are upset and they want this and that. Look, most people go to church on Sunday, they go home. They don't care about all this stuff. But there's someone that does, and there's a lot of energy there, and they draw others into it. Miriam's like that. And she drags Aaron into it. And the it is chagrin over her sister-in-law, Moses' wife, because she was a Cushite woman. Because she was a Cushite woman, says it twice. Now, as I've mentioned, Cush in antiquity is Ethiopia in modernity. Is the issue here that there's some racial animus going on? Is it that Miriam doesn't like her because she's darker skinned? Because she's dark skinned? Is there a racial issue going on? Could it be that she was jealous of Moses' wife? I mention that because, and this will sound rather odd, but I've read a few books in my day. If you look at the slave tradition in Africa, the industry that was really driven by Arab Muslim traders in so many ways, the wholesale or the retail selling of people just doesn't really work for me. I have some classmates here at Cambridge that are part of the Anti-Slavery Commission. They work for the Home Office here in Great Britain. But if you slog through the writings, you'll discover that Cushite slave women sold more. They sold for more than regular garden variety women on the continent, because they were adjudged to be more beautiful and thus more desirable for the rich and famous to have in their harems, because they were anomalies. Is the issue here race and or jealousy because Moses' wife had certain physical characteristics that would, in Miriam's eyes, put her above her? I don't know, but I do know that Miriam drags Aaron into it. We're told in verse 3, Moses is absorbing this criticism. And what you find in Numbers is a lot of negativity and criticism. Moses was very humble in verse 3, more so than anyone on the face of the earth. Immediately the Lord said to Aaron and Moses, "The three of you come out to the tent of meeting." So there's a family fight. And I've done that as a cop. You, come here. And then you take him, you break them up, and then one cop talks to one, the other to the other. You kind of sort through it all. Well, here, the way the story tells, God says, you, come here. And what happens is the three of them go out to the tent of meeting. And what happens is the cloud descends. In verse 6, the Lord speaks. I want you to look at this. It's kind of funny, I think. "Hear now my words," he said. "When there is a prophet of the Lord, I reveal myself in a vision. I speak to him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. In all my house he's faithful. I speak with him face to face, plainly and not in riddles. He even looks at the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" So it's like God says, look, I got your back. What's going on? Don't mess with my man. But The Lord's anger burned against them, and he left them. And when the cloud lifted up, what happens is they go to the tent of meeting, the cloud comes down, and they hear the voice. But then, according to the story, God says this, and the cloud lifts. I love this. This is cool. When the cloud lifted up from above the tent, behold, Miriam had tsarat, or leprosy, like snow. As Aaron turned toward her, behold, she had sa'arat, leprosy. And he said to Moses, please, my Lord, don't hold against us the sin we have committed so foolishly. What happens is the Lord comes down in a cloud, and when the cloud lifts, Miriam, with the big mouth, she's leprous, as white as snow. It's almost like God says, okay, God says, like, you don't like black, you like white? Okay, hon, we'll do you white. Leprous. And the Lord prays, and Moses prays in verse 13. Moses cried, oh God, heal her. So she was healed of it. It's an interesting moment here. But I want you to see how the wilderness journey is characterized by crises, by people performing poorly. I want you to go to chapter 13. And if you look at the end of it, there's a story here in chapter 13, picking up in verse 26. The spies. What I want you to see, if you look at the wilderness journey, it's punctuated by problems here, problems there, with the people, in the family, this, and boom, 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 boom. Everyone's performing poorly. And it's like that, by the way, when you're under pressure. People can be more prone to do it because you're under pressure. You know what happens when you squeeze a lemon? Well, what's inside of it comes out. That's what happens. And these people are under pressure. Well, you can recall, as we surveyed these foundational books, they get to Kadesh Barnea and they dispatched a dozen spies to go check out the land. If you look in verse 26 in chapter 13, they traveled and returned to Moses and Aaron and the entire community of Bnei Israel, the sons of Israel, at Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran. They gave the report to them in the entire assembly. They showed the land's fruit. They gave their account to him and said, we went into the land where you sent us. Indeed, it is flowing with milk and honey. And if there's milk, there's cattle. If there's cattle, there's good grazing land. If there's honey, if it's the land of milk and honey, if there's honey, then there's pollination of flowers. If there's pollination of flowers, there's flowers, there's bees. In other words, the point is the land is rich and productive. It says, look, we went into that land of milk and honey. It's poetic language. This is some of its fruit. Okay, so far so good. He says in verse 28, the people living in the land are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw the sons of Anak there. Amalek is living in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites are living in the mountains, and the Canaanites are living near the sea and along the bank of the river. I got some good news and some bad news. It's a great land. I'm telling you, it's beautiful. I'll tell you, cattle and flowers and pasture land everywhere. That's the good news. The bad news is some people got there before we did. And they're a whole lot bigger than we are. Well, in verse 30, we're told that Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, we should definitely go up and capture the land, for we can certainly do it. He's got that faith. He's that positive thinker. But the men who had gone up with him said, we cannot attack these people because they are stronger than we. They spread among Bnei Israel, the sons of Israel, a bad report about the land they had explored, saying, quote, the land through which we passed to explore devours its residents. All the people we saw there are men of great size. We also saw the Nephilim, in other words, giants. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes as well as theirs. End of quote. Again, one thing after another after another. These people are not performing very well. you have a can-do kind of guy, let's believe God, let's go for it with Caleb. But on the whole, the people have been jinxed by a bad report. And it says at the end, we seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes as well as theirs. They were overwhelmed. And I get it. When you think of it, these people were slaves, 2-3 years beforehand, 2 years beforehand, whatever. What do they made bricks. That's it. What do they know? Domestic help, bricks. They didn't fight their way out of Egypt. They got a free ride. And but here they do have an obstacle in front of them that's formidable. They're not really experienced as an army, number one. Never mind actually going up against individuals who are fortified in cities, behind ramparts, up there on walls. Never mind the fact that people are bigger and stronger than us. They have better positions than we do. I get it. It's daunting. Just to pivot for a second, I'm overwhelmed where I am right now. I don't know about you, but I am. I'm here at Cambridge University. It's a world-class school. It is really, really hard. I mean, really hard. Before I sat down to make the video, I was talking to my wife, Barry, FaceTime. What are you going to do today? Well, I'm going to study for another 5 or 6 hours right after I get off the phone and do my CF&I lecture. That's what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll do a second lecture. I don't know. But I'm going to study. What did you do beforehand? Well, I went to church with a guy here. What did you do before you went to church? I studied. What did you do when you got back? I studied. It's really hard. And not only are the teachers really hard, but my fellow students. I had lunch with a guy the other day, just a regular student. He wanted to tag along with me for lunch after class on Friday, so I couldn't shake him. Okay, yeah, come. And he's got 500 police officers under his command and 65 detectives. I had lunch with another guy who had 2,000 officers under his command. I mean, Dallas PD has 3,007 officers. These people, they're so much more powerful than me. They're so much better than me. I feel like a grasshopper. Here, I told my wife this, I feel like a midget among giants. And I feel that. I really do. But the point is I'm not hopping on a cab and heading to the airport. I'm leaning in on it. I'm going after it because I don't care what my feelings are telling me. I'm just going to focus and do what I need to do. I can't make these feelings stop. They just go. It's like someone has test anxiety. Oh, I feel so anxious. As soon as the anxiety settles down, then I'll take the test. No, you just have to take the test and tell your anxiety to drop dead. You just got to focus on your tasks. You just got to do it. I mean, life is full of daunting circumstances, but that thing of turning back, not willing to make a go of it, to me is problematic. To be faithful. People talk about so-and-so's a faithful Christian. Oftentimes what they mean is dutiful. That is to say, well, every time the church doors open up, Sister Sally is there. She's faithful. No, she's dutiful. She could spend her whole life living in fear, driven by anxiety. The word faithful means just that, full of faith, or being inclined toward faith. And faith has with it this kind of positive component where you throw the dice against the uncertainties of the future. You lean in on it. You go after it. You don't win every battle, but ultimately, you're going to win the war. It's like someone's a professional boxer. They did horribly in the first round. They got knocked down in the second. They almost got knocked out on the third. They did okay on the fourth. The fifth round, they didn't do so good. And they went back to the corner and they told their guy, look, I'm a Christian. Where's God? Hey, the fight's not over. You ever heard of this thing called falling forward? There's just a way that people that have faith, there's a way that we perform that goes forward. It's I drive sports cars. There's a gear for reverse. That's true, but the car is not meant to be driven in reverse. It's meant to be driven going forward. It's the way the game is played, and it's like that with the human beings. Even fighting, you can't. The way that you're designed, you can only fight. You got to look at it. You're designed to deal with what's in front of you, not behind. You don't have anything back there to work with, to fight with. You don't. It's forward oriented, and they don't have it. These people are overrun by their fear. We can't do it. We can't take on these Canaanites. Well, they couldn't take on the Egyptians either, but God showed up. God showed up. It's that lack of faith. And the problem is when they left Egypt, it was a free ride. Well, baby, yeah, we'll just follow. God just parts the waters, and the waters go on top of the Egyptians. That's what I'm talking about. There's a success there, and they enjoy the benefits of it, but they don't have to participate in it, other than just to show up for work. Just to be there is enough. But here, just being there isn't enough. They're organized according to military units, and they're supposed to go in there and fight, and they don't want to do it. Well, it's no good. There's another one, too, I want to alight upon. If you'll look with me in chapter 16. And I think after this, I'll just hit the throttle a little faster to get to the end of the book. But I'm just wanting to underscore how the book of Numbers is punctuated by different examples that are indicative of the fact that something is horribly wrong. And they're not going to get into that land. In fact, the generation is going to drop. They're going to die. They're not going to make it. They're going to get turned around. I want you to look at 16. Now Korah, son of this and that, rose up in verse 2 against Moses and took 250 men for Bnei Israel, men of renown, who had been appointed to the council. Now, there's a window into another story here. It's titled appropriately Korah's Rebellion, Korach in Hebrew. This fellow was a prominent person who gathers together 250 others that are men of renown. It's like it's a church fight. Your pastor, we have a problem here, says one of the deacons, and he doesn't just go himself with one of the ushers, or he gathers together all the deacons in the church and elders and says, Pastor, we need to talk. I mean, that's what this is. This is a pastor, we need to talk moment. One powerful guy who's gathered together 250 of the other chieftains. In verse 3, they assembled against Moses and Aaron, and they said to them, you've gone too far. All the community is holy, all of them, and the Lord is with them. Then why do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of Adonai, of the Lord? It's like, hey, Mo, hey, baby, who do you think you are? God is with all of us. And you think you're some big, who do you think you are? Why do you exalt yourself above us is the issue. Now, if you look at the literature, it demonstrates different kinds of problems. If you look initially, we spoke a few minutes ago about there's the food staples. It deals with appetites, dissatisfaction. That was the story of the, issues with the miracle food. There's family feuds in chapter 12 with Miriam. There's lack of faith against challenging circumstances, as in the crisis at Kadesh Barnea with the 12 spies. Here at Korah's rebellion, there's another set of circumstances where things are going wrong. Now, let's analyze it for a second. If you think about this, Moses is new in dealing with this community. What do I mean by that? 2 years prior, he showed up, threw his staff down, it turned to a snake, and the rest is history. 2 years prior, he took his staff and pointed it at the Red Sea, and the waters parted, and they ran through. All that. But the truth is that Moses is the new kid on the block. prior to that, according to Exodus, for the first 40 years of Moses' life, he was born and raised in Pharaoh's household, kind of removed from the people as an elite in Pharaoh's household. And then he runs and he spends the next 40 years in the wilderness away from everyone and everything in Egypt. And then he shows up 2 years before this. Hey guys, I'm back. Now, Moses, to be sure, is the principal leader amongst the Hebrew people. When you look at the 5 books of Moses, it's abundantly clear he's the top dog, he's the man. It's important to understand, however, that he's reasonably new. And what's important to understand for our purposes here is the fact that the people that were the leaders before he showed up are not happy about what's happening in the new economy. Even slaves, you say, wait a minute, they didn't have leaders. They were slaves back then in Egypt. Even in slave culture, there's a kind of hierarchical structure where there's tribes, tribal leaders, there's clans within the tribes, clan leaders, there's family within the clans, and there's family leaders. There's a kind of structure. If Moses, if Pharaoh says to I want these Hebrews to make more straw, he'll call the head Hebrew. Here's what you need to do. And then he'll turn around and tell the others, and the information trickles down. There is a kind of hierarchical structure, pecking order. If you throw a bunch of chickens in a barnyard together, they're going to come up with some kind of pecking order. That's where the term comes from. And there's going to be the one who rules the roost. It's like that. There were tribal chieftains and leaders in prominent families. What happens is in fact, you might recall that when Moses first showed up in Egypt, before he ever went to Pharaoh, he went to the elders and they gave him a pass to go then and speak to Pharaoh. He had to check in with resident authorities. Here, the resident authorities want to throw him under the bus because he's become more and more powerful, and in their own estimation, they're becoming less and less. I had that problem once. In fact, you already heard me to say that before I came to sit down and do this talk, I went to church here in Cambridge, well, just outside of Cambridge, actually. And the pastor there, the rector, the Right Reverend Paul Butler, was a parishioner of mine in Dallas, a student at CFNI, and then went to the church I pastored. The church that I pastored that I went to, I remember that it was maybe a group of 30 people or so. And the church was just in trouble, been for the longest. And actually one of their deacons asked me, I was just working full time at CFNI, said, hey, do you know anyone that might want to take a church? We're looking for a pastor. And I thought, well, I'll do it. I didn't expect that to come out, but hey. So what happens, there were like 30 people in the church. And I was there for a year. And I'm there for a year. And there's about 130 people in the church. And the elders were mad at me. It was a mess. It was horrible. Absolutely. You'd think, you'd think, look, if you have a business, okay, it's not doing so good, but then you get a new manager and all of a sudden, boy, you can't keep up with the orders. You'd think they'd be happy. Oh, it was horrible. It was one of the worst experiences of my life, and I didn't understand it, but now I do. What had happened is, you have a group of 30 men, and, one guy, manages a gas station, another guy this. You're not dealing with the rich and famous, but this is their church, and they're the elders, and, things, you pass by them, and they're the ones in charge, and with that group of 30 people. But now all of a sudden there's 130 people there and a strong personality like me, and they're not in charge anymore. There's a sense of a loss of power and a loss of control. And to be sure, personally, I'm not an easy guy to control. I'm not. I'm really a tough, type A kind of guy. And I just don't relish getting pushed around. I don't. I just really don't. Not the kind of guy to mess with. I'm just not. I don't want to get. But the point here is that these, Moses is so powerful with the anointing and the miracles and the lawgiver and all that. He's the one that's calling the shots. And the old shot callers are, hey, they're kind of displaced in the new economy. And they cry foul, hey, look, Mo, you're not the only one around here, buddy. And they're wanting to take them on. It's a mutiny. Well, Moses goes before the Lord, and what happens is there's an earthquake. You read, the Lord opens up and swallows Korah and his group and their kin. The earth opens, swallows them up. You can see God, you can see heaven coming to help here on earth. And by the way, after that, when you look at the literature, you know what happens? The people are mad at Moses for killing Korah and those people. Moses had nothing to do with it. It was God. My point here is things go horribly wrong. They're wandering around the wilderness now. If you look in chapter 20, verses 1 through 21, Miriam is going to die. And it's a bad season in life. If you look in chapter 20, verses 22 through 29, then Aaron dies. The generation on the whole has died off. And now we're really at the end of the wilderness trek. It's been said that the book of Numbers records the highlights of the wilderness journey, better lowlights. It's really checkered by rebellion, by grief. And it's a journey that should have been short, that stretches out just shy of 40 years. When you're looking at chapter 22, verse 1 through 36, 13 at the end, we're really looking at the latter part of the journey, where the older generation has died off in large measure. Moses is there, Caleb and Joshua, better part have died off. It's a younger set. Moses' family members have died off. And now we're looking at the last year of Moses' life, or just approaching the last year of his life, where they're now making their entrance into, they're not going into Canaan, but they're going through Transjordania. Trans is the Latin prefix for to cross. It's to cross over. It's the other side of the Jordan. And there's different incidents that are recorded there. We have a new generation, we have a new mindset, there's a new disposition, a new set of circumstance, and the author, Moses, records some of that. There's much to say about that, but we're much out of time with that. And I say that regretfully because I do want to land on something, but perhaps I'll be able to get back to it later. Or perhaps you'll just read chapters 22, 3, 4, and 5 for yourself and get a window into, even with God working on their behalf, there's still a way that people work against themselves. So I know that's a little cryptic. I'm not telling you what it is. But in any case, I'm not telling you a lot of things as we survey the literature. I'm just surveying it. So in any case, Numbers begins with the numbering of a population. And by the way, there's a second numbering in, if you look at my section 3 here, E, the second numbering in chapter 26. There's less, if you do the math on the second census at the end of the wilderness journey, if you do the census at the end, it's less than the census at the beginning. Now, something has gone horribly wrong. Because if we're looking at a span of time approaching 40 years, you would expect a population to grow during that time. You know what I mean? Men and women, boys and girls, they married just after puberty. They went home at night. What did they do? They're not watching TV. They're making love. They're having babies. You would expect 40 years or abouts later to have a bigger crowd, not a less. But they got wiped out. This wilderness experience was just bad. All kinds of death and carnage, and you can kind of feel it when you read through the literature. It was a monster of their own making. I think when you look at the literature, you're not going to blame God for it, because these people just had a lot to be desired in the way that they performed. And before you point the finger at them, oh, those Jews, look how they didn't walk by faith. And look, you want to take the log out of your own eye before you take the speck out of somebody else's. That this problem of not believing God and walking by faith and getting bested by the darker side of our own nature, our human nature, isn't just a problem with Jews, it's a problem with yous and me. I mean, it's something we all have to wrestle with, I think, if we're just honest. Well, speaking of wrestling with, there's more to wrestle with here, but it's just a survey. God bless. Let's do this again, and I'll come back to you with Deuteronomy. Ciao.